In fact, the targets that the Trudeau government signed on to in Paris were targets that we had prepared at the tail end of the Conservative government. I'm committed to that through partnering with provinces, not an Ottawa knows best approach as we've seen with the carbon tax. But you're right, I'm glad you're looking at our policy. I hope a lot of people do. We weren't solid enough on this issue in the last few years, and when we said to people we were against the carbon tax because it was unfair, it was uncompetitive, we had to say what we were for, and that's what I will do. The environment is important to me, not just as a parliamentarian and party leader, as a father and as someone that considers myself environmentally minded.
The new Conservative leader there, sounding a bit different from his predecessors. Erin O'Toole is committing to hit the Paris targets for greenhouse gas emissions, as you just heard. He says his party hasn't been solid enough on the environment issue. Is the true blue Conservative going to make the official opposition more green? Time for the Power Panel to weigh in on that question. In Toronto, host of the morning show at Global News Radio 640 Toronto, Supriya Dwivedi. Melissa Lantsman, National Vice President of Enterprise Canada, joins us from there too. And over in Gatineau, political commentator and former NDP MP, Françoise Boivin. Melissa, I'll start with you on some of what we heard from Erin O'Toole in our interview earlier in the show. I wanted to jump on what he said about Paris climate targets because it was actually the impetus for me asking the question was I was combing through his platform, which is very lengthy. I was looking at all these sort of print interviews that he gave. And while he had talked at length about the carbon tax, and I've interviewed him in the past at length about his opposition to it and challenged him on that, he had not yet said whether or not a government under his leadership would meet the Paris climate targets. It was a bit of there was a bit of debate, I guess, during the campaign, the leadership campaign, because Peter MacKay said it was aspirational. There was lots of criticism in the last campaign for the Conservatives about their lack of commitment to those goals or how they're going to get there. What did you think of what Erin O'Toole said specifically on the climate targets, and who is he speaking to?
Well, I think the answer is simple on who he's speaking to is like, hey, Canadians, take a second look at the Conservative Party. There's a lot of humility in that statement saying, this is where we fell short in the last election, and I'm not that kind of leader. I'm not the kind of leader that's going to come out without a plan. I mean, you saw a detailed policy platform when he was running for party leadership. So that's, that says something about his, I would say policy wonkness, if you will, and his interest in making sure that Conservatives have solutions to all of the problems that Canadians face. This is one of them. The Conservatives were never against frankly, the target itself. It was just about the way to get there. So I look forward to seeing how Erin O'Toole puts forward an environmental policy that gives Canadians a need to take a second look at the Conservatives.
I thought it was interesting, Supriya, a couple of things that I'm hoping you can weigh on. First of all, that Mr. O'Toole didn't simply chalk up where they fell short in the campaign to a bad communication strategy, which is what we had heard from, for example, Andrew Scheer when he lost. And a few other candidates. We just didn't communicate our plan well enough. He actually said our plan, our plan fell short. We have to present something in addition to just opposing the carbon tax. Where I think he will face continued and more scrutiny after saying something like this is over what the actual plan is. There is a heavy focus, even though he rejected my assertion, on technology. A lot of technology that ends up being very expensive for per ton of reduction in emissions. And there is a lot of deference to provinces, which is, I think, understandable from one perspective, but also doesn't always help you achieve the goals that you set out as a federal government. What do you think about the plan that he maybe has presented and some of the strategy behind the way he's approaching the issue?
So I will echo what Melissa just said with respect to it showing humility, and I think is a good start for Mr. O'Toole versus, the Conservative Party under Andrew Scheer. I think it's a step in the right direction, but the devil's always in the details. So you're against a carbon tax, that's all well and good. Doug Ford in Ontario basically demonized the cap and trade system we had in this province and conflated them constantly to the point where carbon tax and a cap and trade system were readily used interchangeably within debates and on even in interviews and in copy, and the media didn't really call him out on that. So we're at this point where it's like, okay, we all recognize that climate is burning and things need to be done. But what are those things? You need to be able to have a plan in place to get into emissions targets. And to be fair, this isn't just a Conservative problem. It is absolutely in every kind of government problem, because the Liberals as well have, all said that they're going to go forward with these emissions targets. And then we always end up falling short. I think recognizing, number one, that climate change is a real pressing problem, and also recognizing, part of that is that there's a huge swath of the voting demographic, particularly millennials and Gen Zers, that aren't even going to look at a party seriously and give it a real consideration if they don't take climate change seriously.
And here's the big balancing act, I think, and Françoise, please weigh in on this, that we've seen play out in the Liberal Party, in the government right now to a certain degree, but I think especially we will see play out in this Conservative Party. You need those younger voters. You need people in the 905 and other areas who clearly care about an issue like this. And not to say that people in other jurisdictions don't care, but they are weighing other considerations for themselves, like the people who live in the oil patch, or a huge sect of the support for Erin O'Toole right now out in the West, right? And so I think it becomes, not ultimately always a successful balancing act for any party that tries to say that there can be some sort of perfect balance between the two. I'm guessing ultimately you have to make some hard decisions. Françoise, what do you think?
Yes. No, just kidding. What I find absolutely amazing with Erin O'Toole right now is that you sense that he has one goal, and his goal is the finish line, the election day. So everything is really thought about, every message he's delivering, every answer. So he's very realistic on the environment file. It pays off the humility. He doesn't want to be painted in a corner as an old dinosaur who doesn't realize that there's a problem. He's going to come out more like a realist. And he's hard to define in a negative way by his adversary. He must have been hitting the right chords on different some of these issues, because you had the Bloc Québécois leader today coming out in front of the media trying to say, oh, well, don't listen to him because that's the same party that said this and that's the same. So to me, it shows what? It shows that he is scoring points on those issues. And I was listening to your interview with him very thoroughly. The questions were not easy. It was easy for him to fall down and trip and so on. And he was pretty clear on his message, on his humility, yes, but saying we will have a plan. It might not be the best plan that everybody will be in love with, but I suspect he's going to come up with some type of a practical plan, and he seems to be playing on all the demographic. I mean, we'll talk later about the workers and so on and so forth. You can see what they're aiming at very clearly.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.